The shriek of tires sliced through the hum of downtown Seattle. A woman tripped on the edge of the curb, her heels scraping the pavement as panic flickered in her wide eyes. A delivery truck thundered down the avenue, closing in fast. Nathaniel Brooks, Nate to most people, was already running before he even realized it. Dressed in a wrinkled shirt and clutching a manila folder of resumes under one arm, he dropped his worn leather briefcase without a second thought. Time seemed to freeze. People nearby gasped but didn't move, paralyzed by shock. Nate lunged forward, wrapped both arms around the stunned woman's waist, and pulled her backward just as the truck howled past them, missing her by inches. His breath came in short, ragged bursts as he lay beside her on the pavement, the cold concrete pressing into his back. She trembled, knees scraped, her sleek business suit torn at the knee. Her wide eyes, gray like an overcast sky, searched his face in disbelief. "I didn't even see it coming," she whispered, her voice shaky. "You're safe now," Nate said between gasps, his heart pounding like a jackhammer in his chest. He helped her sit up, checking for injuries. She looked to be in her early 30s, with her hair in a tight professional bun that had loosened in the fall. "Thank you," she murmured, though her tone sounded more dazed than grateful. Nate nodded once, forced a small smile, and stood. The sidewalk was scattered with the pages of his resume, now dirty and damp from the city's grime. As he scrambled to gather them, the reality hit him like a second truck. His job interview. 15 minutes late. He glanced down at his watch, then at the woman again. She was watching him, mouth slightly parted, unsure whether to say something more. But Nate had already turned away, jamming the crumpled resumes back into the folder. "No problem," he muttered as he backed into the crowd. "Just be careful at intersections." And like that he vanished into the sea of pedestrians. One life saved. One opportunity lost. What Nate didn't know was that the woman he had just rescued wasn't just another face in the crowd. And by the end of the day she would find him again, and turn his entire world upside down. By the time Nate arrived at his modest two-bedroom apartment on the city's east side, dusk had settled across the skyline. The hallway light buzzed overhead as he unlocked the door, his shoulders sagging with the weight of a day that had taken more than it gave. Before he could even slip off his shoes, the sound of small feet came pattering across the wooden floor. "Daddy!" 10-year-old Sophie Brooks launched herself at him, her ponytail bouncing and her cheeks smudged with colored pencil. A half-finished drawing peeked out from the table behind her, something with a dragon and a castle, her usual fantasy. Nate bent down, scooping her up with a tired smile. Her arms wrapped around his neck like ivy clinging to stone. For a moment, the ache in his chest loosened. "How'd it go?" she asked, looking up at him with those big, trusting eyes that had no idea how cruel the world could be. He hesitated. She had stayed up late last night, helping him practice answers to questions she didn't even understand. She made flashcards and sat through mock interviews with the seriousness of a courtroom judge. "I didn't get to do the interview," Nate admitted softly. Sophie's face fell. "You didn't make it?" "Something came up. A woman was about to get hit by a truck." He spoke quietly, sitting down on their frayed old couch. "I couldn't let it happen. I had to help." Her brow furrowed. "Did she get hurt?" "No," he said with a small smile. "She's fine. Scared but fine." Silence filled the room. Then Sophie reached over and took his hand, her tiny fingers squeezing his. "You always say being kind matters more than being successful." Nate's throat tightened. "That's right, sweetheart." She leaned her head on his arm, her voice barely a whisper. "Then you did the right thing." The only sound in the room was the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old pipes. The world had moved on, but Sophie's belief in her father held firm, a flickering candle in the dark. Meanwhile, across the city in the back seat of a sleek black SUV, the woman Nate had saved was still reeling from the day's events. Her name was Caroline Donovan, and she was far from ordinary. Chief Executive Officer of Donovan Ventures, Caroline was known in corporate circles as a titan, sharp, efficient, and cold as polished marble. The tech empire she built from the ground up was worth over $1.8 billion. But today, her thoughts weren't on acquisitions or board meetings. She stared out the tinted window, replaying the moment again and again in her head, the sound of the truck, the arm around her waist, the stranger's voice as he asked if she was okay. He never asked for her name. He didn't stay for thanks. He had simply disappeared, as if pulled back into the currents of the city. Selflessness. Real selflessness. It rattled her. Her assistant droned on from the front passenger seat, listing her evening appointments and reading back calendar events. Caroline was not listening. "Cancel the dinner," she said suddenly. There was a pause. "Excuse me?" "Cancel it. And I want a full list of walk-in applicants from today. The ones who didn't make it to their interviews or were turned away. All of them." Yes, I'll get right on that." Caroline leaned her head back against the leather seat and closed her eyes. She didn't know his name. Not yet. But she was going to find him. And when she did, she was going to change his life, just like he had changed hers. "May I ask why you're so invested in this?" Caroline Donovan's voice cut sharply through the hum of her private office. Her assistant hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Because I need to find him," Caroline said simply, her tone like flint striking steel. Across the city, in a small kitchen filled with the scent of leftover pasta and the low hum of evening stillness, Nathaniel Brooks stirred a pan on the stove. The tomato sauce hissed and bubbled as steam curled upward. At the worn kitchen table, his daughter Sophie colored quietly, her crayons scratching across thick white paper. "Do you think you'll find another job?" she asked without looking up. "I'll try again," Nate replied, his voice even. He stirred the sauce with a tired rhythm, but something deep inside him wavered. He had tried before, many times. But being a single dad with a resume full of unexplained gaps and nonlinear work history, that never made hiring managers excited. Sophie slid the finished drawing across the table. It was the two of them, drawn as stick figures with big grins on their faces, standing in front of a little house under a massive yellow sun. Nate smiled softly. She had drawn him taller than the house. "You're bigger than the problems, Dad," she said with conviction. Nate chuckled under his breath and gently ruffled her hair. "We'll see about that." The next morning came too soon. Long before sunrise, Nate was up, ironing a button-down shirt that had seen better days. He wasn't going to let yesterday's missed opportunity drag him down, not today. He packed Sophie's lunch, kissed her on the forehead, and walked her to school. Then he headed toward the bus stop, resume folder in hand, determined to face another job fair with whatever confidence he could summon. But fate had something different in mind. As he stood waiting, a sleek black luxury vehicle pulled to a stop at the curb. The passenger side window glided down silently. Inside sat Caroline Donovan. Her face was calm, her eyes hidden behind dark designer sunglasses, but there was an intensity in her posture that made Nate freeze. He blinked in disbelief. "You?" Caroline removed her sunglasses slowly, her gaze fixed on him. "Get in. We need to talk." Nate hesitated. Everything in him screamed not to step into a stranger's car, especially one driven by a chauffeur in a suit. But something in her voice, firm, clear, and just a bit grateful, nudged his instincts in another direction. He opened the door and slid into the cool, leather-scented interior. The door shut behind him with a soft click. Caroline turned to face him fully. "You lost something important yesterday, didn't you?" Nate's jaw tensed. "Doesn't matter. You're safe. That's what counts." Her lips curved slightly at the edges. "Do you know who I am?" He shook his head. "My name is Caroline Donovan. I'm the CEO of Donovan Ventures." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "And I owe you my life." Nate blinked, still unsure if this was real. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said sharply. "That's where you're wrong. People watched. People gasped. But nobody moved. You moved." The hum of the engine filled the silence between them. "I asked my team to pull the list of missed applicants from yesterday," she continued. "Your name was on that list. Nathaniel Brooks. You were scheduled to interview for a logistics position at my company." Nate's breath caught in his chest. His heartbeat quickened. "How do you even know that?" he asked. "Because I made sure I knew." Her voice softened for the first time since they met. I want you in my office tomorrow morning. Not for an interview. For a job offer. Nate sat back, the weight of her words pressing down on him like a mountain. For years, he had been overlooked, dismissed, cast aside as just another name in a long line of applications. And now, the very moment that had seemingly cost him everything was opening a door he never thought possible. The bus he had been waiting for rumbled past them, unnoticed. "What if I mess up?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Caroline leaned in slightly, her tone gentler than before. "You won't." For the first time in months, a spark of hope flickered inside Nate. A warmth, slow and cautious, spread through his chest like a fire catching dry wood. That evening, when he told Sophie what had happened, she gasped dramatically, eyes wide with wonder. "You're serious?" she squealed, bouncing on the couch. "I told you were bigger than the problems." She hugged him so tightly he thought his ribs might crack. And for once, the invisible weight on his shoulders didn't feel so crushing. But later that night, while Sophie slept soundly in her room, Nate lay in bed staring at the ceiling. One thought kept circling his mind like a predator. Nothing this good ever comes without a cost. This was just the beginning. He could feel it. The next morning, the headquarters of Donovan Ventures loomed above him like a monument to power. Its glass walls shimmered in the sun, reflecting back the sky and the skyline alike. Nate stared up at it from the sidewalk, adjusting the second-hand tie around his neck. He caught his own reflection in the mirrored windows and almost laughed. His shoes were scuffed, his shirt a little loose, and the briefcase he carried looked like it had seen too many rainy commutes. But Sophie's words rang in his ears, "Show them who you are, Dad." He stepped inside. The lobby buzzed with movement. Men and women in tailored suits and sharp heels passed by without sparing him a second glance. The sound of heels on polished marble echoed like a metronome counting down his confidence. And then, Caroline Donovan appeared at the top of the staircase. She wore a navy blue suit that fit her like armor, her posture perfect, her presence commanding. Her gaze landed on him. "Mr. Brooks," she called, her voice cutting through the noise. The conversations in the lobby died instantly. Heads turned. Nate stood a little taller. His fingers tightened around the strap of his briefcase. He walked toward her. Whatever happened next, he was ready. Caroline Donovan rarely addressed anyone directly in front of her executive board, especially not like this. Nathaniel Brooks stood up a little straighter as she descended the marble staircase with the quiet authority of someone who owned the building and the skyline it overlooked. The clicks of her high heels echoed across the sleek floor like a countdown. "Mr. Brooks," she greeted, offering a subtle nod. Nate's heart thudded, but he kept his posture steady. "Miss Donovan," he replied, his voice lower than usual. Without a word, she gestured for him to follow. They stepped into a conference room lined with glass walls, behind which the city stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The table gleamed beneath the overhead lights, surrounded by senior executives whose faces flickered with a mix of curiosity and caution. Caroline motioned toward the seat at the head of the table, her seat. Nate froze. "Are you sure?" "Sit," she said, firm and without room for argument. He obeyed, unsure whether to feel honored or like he had just sat in the hot seat. The wood was cold beneath his damp palms. A man in a tailored charcoal suit leaned forward and adjusted his glasses. "With all due respect, Miss Donovan, who is this man?" Caroline's fingers laced together as she spoke, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "He's the reason I'm standing here alive today," she said plainly. "And he's the reason this company is about to get a new kind of leadership in logistics." Murmurs rippled around the room. "This is not an interview," she continued. "Mr. Brooks has already proven something that none of you could ever put on a resume. He acts when it matters." Silence followed. One of the older board members cleared his throat. "With respect, heroism doesn't guarantee productivity. We need measurable results. Strategy. Execution." Nate felt the weight of doubt pressing in, his chest tightening. The urge to shrink back was powerful. But then, he remembered Sophie's voice in his head. "You're bigger than the problems, Dad." He leaned forward. "You want strategy?" he said, steadying his voice. "I may not have a fancy degree, but I know what it's like to make things work with nothing. I've built delivery routes on napkins. I've solved supply issues for mom-and-pop stores that didn't have the money to hire consultants. He looked each of them in the eye. I come from a world where efficiency isn't just a buzzword, it's survival. And I'd bet that counts for something. The room stilled. Even Caroline's lips twitched with the trace of a smile. For the first time, Nate felt like he belonged at that table. After the meeting, Caroline walked him through the halls of Donovan Ventures. Staff members peered over their desks, their curiosity unmasked. To them, Nate was an anomaly, a man who had entered their world overnight, shattering expectations. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked as they reached the entrance to her corner office. Caroline paused, her face softer now, more human. "Because yesterday, I saw something I haven't seen in years," she said. "Real humanity. I've spent my life building this empire by being cold, calculating, and ruthless. Trusting numbers over people." Her eyes locked onto his. "But when you pulled me back from that street, you didn't see a CEO. You saw a person worth saving. You reminded me who I used to be." Nate held her gaze, his voice quiet but unwavering. "I didn't do it for praise. I just did what anyone should have done." "Exactly," she said. "That's why I trust you. You'll remind everyone here what it means to do the right thing, especially when it's the hard thing." The space between them filled with a moment of mutual understanding. Weeks passed. Nate dove headfirst into his new role. He stayed late, asked endless questions, and treated every challenge like one of Sophie's puzzles, meant to be solved with patience and persistence. Gradually, the results began to show. Delivery efficiency improved. Communication across departments smoothed out. Workers respected him, not because of a title, but because he listened. It was not easy. There were nights he came home physically drained, his hands shaking from stress. Guilt gnawed at him for spending less time with Sophie. But she always greeted him with a smile and a quiet, "It's okay, Dad. We're building something." Her belief carried him. Even Caroline began to soften in her own way. Sometimes she would stop by the logistics wing unannounced, watching him work. Their conversations slowly drifted beyond spreadsheets and deadlines, toward memories, regrets, dreams long buried. One evening, long after most of the office had emptied, she found him hunched over a set of shipping models. She leaned against the doorframe. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. He looked up. "Regret what?" "Saving me." He blinked, surprised. "Never." "Why not?" She hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because it changed both our lives. And I wonder if you even realize how much." Nate met her gaze. Maybe it was always meant to happen this way. Months later, Donovan Ventures unveiled its new logistics system, built primarily on Nate's designs and groundwork. The press praised it. Investors celebrated. But for Nate, the most important moment was not the headlines. It was the presentation day. He stepped onto the stage next to Caroline. In the front row sat Sophie, her eyes wide with pride, her small hands clapping wildly as cameras flashed. Tears blurred Nate's vision. For the first time, his daughter wasn't looking at a man constantly knocked down by life. She was looking at her father standing tall. Caroline stepped forward and spoke into the microphone. "Sometimes the greatest leaders are not the ones who climb the corporate ladder. They are the ones who put others before themselves, even when it costs them everything. Nathaniel Brooks is proof of that." Applause filled the room, but Nate heard only one voice rise above the rest. "That's my dad." Sophie shouted. He smiled, his heart full, not with power or wealth, but with something far greater, meaning. Later that evening, when the lights had dimmed and the crowd had dispersed, Nate stood beside Caroline on the balcony outside the event hall. The city stretched out below them, glowing with endless possibility. "You gave me a chance no one else would," Nate said. Caroline shook her head. "No. You gave me something first." He looked at her, puzzled. "A reminder that life isn't just about numbers and margins," she said. "You brought something real back into this place. I just returned the favor." They stood in silence, the wind brushing past, the city humming beneath their feet. For Nate, this journey had never been about climbing ladders or collecting titles. It was about redemption, about perseverance, and above all, it was about love, a daughter's unshakable faith in a father who refused to give up. As he walked home that night, Sophie's hand in his, her laughter echoing into the cool night air, Nate understood one thing for certain. Sometimes, the doors that slam in your face are just guiding you toward the ones you were always meant to open. If this story moved you, even just a little, hit that like button to let us know. Subscribe so you never miss the next twist of fate in stories just like this one. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Nathaniel's place? Your voice matters here.